You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Willis Podcast. Before I get to today's episode, I just want to say thank you very much to everybody who tweeted at James Altucher that I should be his podcast producer / talent booker. He hasn't made a decision yet, but if I got that job, it would be freaking amazing because it would be an extension of this show essentially, because it would be booking talent. And obviously I can do that job. At least I think I can do that job. I don't know. Anyways, I also want to say thank you so much for everyone who leaves reviews on iTunes. I actually put a link in the show notes for this week's episode, which is 168. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, it really helps us out. I want to say thank you, by the way, to everyone who keeps sharing these shows. My analytics keep going up and up and up, and I can see the numbers climbing as well. So thank you, everyone who shares these episodes, because it really tremendously helps us all out a lot. How does it help you out? You probably are asking yourself as you're driving or whatever you're doing while you're listening to this. How does sharing this show help me, Dave? Is that what you're asking me? I'll tell you how it helps out. Because people who actually can see it actually are gaining something from this. Like I said, it's a free film school. Literally, somebody who's thinking about making a movie, thinking about doing audio work, thinking about going into producing, thinking about going into writing, sharing these episodes. It's creating awareness of the show, and they can actually listen to this. And you know what? It's free. There's no cost to this whatsoever other than time, I know. But there is, if they did want to actually do this, this is a really good gateway. It's a door to all things. And I just want to keep reiterating that point that, if you go out in the real world and make mistakes, you want to make free mistakes, as many free mistakes as you can, because costly mistakes, ones that actually cost you money or a huge amount of time or a huge amount of resources, are the ones that really come back to bite you. So that's why sharing this show really helps out, because it helps me out, it helps you out, it helps other people out. And, I think that's what we're kind of here for, right? Well, at least that's what I think we're here for. So what am I currently reading? I actually wanted to mention this because a few people had asked me, a few questions about a book I was actually tweeting about. So what I'm currently reading is Extreme Ownership by former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink. It's a book about leadership, and again, I'm always reading these books and how it relates to film sets. And with this book, it actually ties in with leadership and responsibility, and it's something that I've harped on a lot. I read the book, I loved it. I would love to have Jocko on the podcast because I actually made a ton of notes just to talk to him about some of this stuff, about leadership and running into problems and how you quash problems before they get too big. And some of you have heard me talk about this, and have heard guests talk about this too, where you have problems on a film set. How do you solve them? Because you really can't just ignore problems. Not even on a film set, but just in life in general, because then they get to become big problems, right? And then what I'm currently watching is Mutilator. I actually was watching a couple days ago. It's a 1984 movie by Bud Cooper, and it's a slasher. I'm a big fan of slashers, and it's one I've actually never seen before. But Arrow video releasing actually had a filmathon, and that was one of the movies, and I decided to watch it. So if you're interested in that book or that movie, there's links in the show notes again for episode 158. I'm sorry, 168. Wow, I'm going backwards in time now. So what we're not going to be doing backwards in time is with this week's guest. This week's guest is a writer, director, producer who is currently residing in Florida. Again, I want to feature filmmakers that don't actually live in either New York or LA. I think it's very refreshing whenever you have somebody that's not in one of those two spaces in North America, or in the United States of America, I should say. This guy's latest film, Cam Girl, is out now on DVD and through Amazon Prime. This is a very good conversation about writing without distraction, finding time to actually write, how he actually found an agent, a manager, a producer, just by getting a script out there. And also we talk about a lot about making this film and how he actually did it on a shoestring budget, one location. We're going to hear all about that good stuff. This is episode 168 with guest Curt Weiser.
You're listening to the Dave Willis Podcast.
Yeah, you're in Florida. I forgot about that too. Up until I started actually doing all the research for the podcast episode. Because I always forget where everybody's from because I meet so many people online. That's how you and I met, and I'm always like, man, where does this person live? Well, in my worldview, Curt, they either live in New York or they live in L.A. So I forget, and they don't even live in Philadelphia in my own worldview. So it's like I forgot. I sometimes forget that there are other places besides New York and L.A.
Yeah, I mean, and in fact, that's something I was thinking about. It's kind of weird how even on the same coast, we're kind of like in the same, I wouldn't say predicament, but kind of just situation where we're kind of really close to these meccas in the film industry. I've got Georgia just north of me where all the tax write-offs are, and I keep seeing that Georgia Peach, made in Georgia at the end of like all TV shows and Zombieland and The Walking Dead. It's just like, man. So it's like kind of a strange thing. It's just like calling me north or west or something, but so I don't know. It's an interesting thing to kind of navigate.
So let me ask you this, Curt. When because you're an independent filmmaker in Florida, do you notice like in your area, in your town, is there like an interest in filmmaking, or are you sort of like the sort of needle in the haystack, so to speak?
Well, I'd say, and this is kind of interesting for aspiring filmmakers to know, is that no, there's definitely a pretty prominent, independent film industry. In fact, I'm sure that'd be the case in a lot of places. Like it's more there's an active interest because it's not. It has more novelty to it because there's not big productions everywhere, and it's not like New York and Georgia and California where it's not. For instance, if you have a location you're looking for. If you're trying to go to some coffee shop and you ask them, "Oh, we go to film here," it'd be like, "Oh, we're making a movie." It would be like, "Oh, really? That's interesting." And oh yeah, it'll have some clout to it as opposed to New York or LA. They'd be like, "Okay, it'll be X amount of dollars for one day," and I hope it's or they'll say no because they've been it's been a disaster before where they've had film crews there that mess the floor or whatever it is. So I'd say it's an opportunity to get credits, to kind of get experience, which I've definitely taken advantage of over the years now.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits. I always tell people if they live, in the Midwest or even in any sort of rural area, they have more benefits than they think they do, because you can just go out to somebody like a restaurant or a local business and at least approach them, and it'd be a little easier than, say, if you're in LA and you say, "Hey, I really like your office or your restaurant. I'd love to film here," and they say, "Oh yeah, that'll be $5,000 a day." That actually happened to a friend of mine, by the way. He actually found this little deli that opened. I don't know why. It's not really a deli. It's more of like a breakfast spot. But he basically said, "Hey, I like to film here." Well, they let him, film there before they opened on like Sunday mornings before they opened at like 5 or 6 a.m. And suddenly they started like charging a little more and then asking for a little more. And then finally they said like it was going to be like $6,000 or something to film there. And he goes, "What the hell?" So, when guys like us, we live close by. I live very close to New York, about 2 hours away. You probably live, 2 hours away from Georgia. Tons of stuff going on up there. We're right by the hubs of all this stuff. I also am about 4 hours away from Pittsburgh, which is a pretty big film hub.
And Night of the Living Dead, man.
Yeah, seriously, man. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and even Day of the Dead. Funny you mentioned that. On Day of the Dead, I actually met a filmmaker who shot something where they shot Day of the Dead, and he was like, it was amazing because it was just, it's so remote and away from everyone else. And I actually was looking for a place like that when I was a part of this one film project. Because you listen to the show, Curt, so that there's been so many projects that I've been a part of that have fallen apart. So it's just when I mention these projects in passing, it's just like, oh yeah, which one is that fell apart? But I was doing this one, and I actually contacted them, and the person actually said to me, the woman who actually who was the property manager, and she said, oh, there's actually businesses here now. She's like, we don't want to actually keep having films here. She's like, it's not profitable, and there's so many businesses now, and there's like a gravel place in here now. I'm like, God damn it, always late to the party. But I don't know. I just thought that'd be a little fun fact for people in case they're huge Day of the Dead fans, the original Day of the Dead. So now it's like a sand and gravel place is there.
You know what I've always found it fascinating when I learned it is I read a book, a biography on Romero and Night of the Living Dead, and it talked about how most people don't realize that film changed how copyright law is.
Oh yeah,
because as the story goes is they had the copyright notice, the little logo with the title, and the original title was Night of the Flesh Eating Ghouls or something like that. And when they got distribution lined up, the distributor took that title card away, replaced it, and when they did that, the copyright notice went away. And at that time, they didn't have it stated, where copyright happens when it's committed to an existing medium. So that actually became a huge thing. And as far as I know, yeah, it's still in the public domain because of that, the original black and white. And they've tried to, that's why there's a colorized version and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Which they tried to regain the copyright, but in doing so, all it did is they have the copyright to the colored version, and etc. So it's kind of unusual.
Yeah, they're actually they found some extra footage now of Night of the Living Dead, and they're actually planning on splicing it back together with the main part of it, and then that will be the next pitch to the copyright. I actually went to a Night of the Living Dead screening probably about 2 or 3 years ago out in Pittsburgh, and that's one of the things that they were talking about. It was with It was with John Russo was there, Russ Steiner was there, but George Romero wasn't there, but everybody else was. There was a ton of cast members and stuff, and that was one of the things that they were talking about was putting this one cut together, and that would be the new copyright pitch. Interesting. So, and then that movie obviously has spawned the whole zombie genre, and it's just gone on to just do it's etched in time now.
It's a classic, yeah.
Did you know George Romero is actually doing? Did you hear it's called I think it's called Race of the Dead?
No. Yeah. Is that like Death Race 2000 meets Night of the Living Dead or something?
Yeah. Basically, what's going to happen is it's about these rich people have zombie races, and
sold.
And basically, they have they're zombies in race cars. And now, I hope it's better than the last few Romero movies, because I actually had a love-hate relationship with Land of the Dead. Diary of the Dead was actually not bad in my opinion, and then there was what was the other one? It was like the Hatfields and McCoys feud. There was there was a Feuding Families. I forget what that. I don't even know what that was called. I just tuned it out. But now we're going to see Race of the Dead, so I can't wait.
I think the last one I remember was a Diary. That was the one that was like found footage version of that kind of genre, right? Wasn't that one? Okay, yeah. So that's the last one I remember seeing. But yeah, no, he keeps going with it. I mean, that's your thing. That's your bread and butter. You keep eating. So,
because it is George Romero. So what happens is every so often. He even admits this in interviews. Every so often, he'll get a random producer will come by and say, "Hey, I have $1 million or whatever for you to make a zombie film," and he goes, "Okay," and that's it. And that's how it gets. It happens. Have you ever seen Romero's work outside of zombie films?
I don't think so. I saw the documentary on him and I thought was really good. But no, I've just known of, his interview footage and the zombie stuff.
Yeah, it's actually, pretty interesting. I actually like a lot of this stuff. Like Martin is a really interesting take on vampires. And I think, what was the other one? I think it was called like Bruiser or something. I forget what it was called. But he actually, it was, he also did, I think he did Creepshow. It's just stuff like that. It's like, he actually has had, it was called Bruiser now that I think about it. It had Jason Fleming in it. And it's I don't know. I do like his stuff outside of all the zombie stuff. I think it's kind of cool how he ebbs and flows in and out of it. But yeah, I mean, you can't really pass up a movie about, with George Romero about racing zombies. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of see that movie to get it.
Do you know if he resists that, though? Do you think, like, deep down he wants to do more of, he's got to do this romantic comedy that he's been wanting to do for for 10 years or something? Or, what I really want to do is a musical.
If he came out with a romantic comedy, I honestly don't think that his fans would know how to respond to that. I would definitely go see it. But, I mean, I think people will feel torn because they're like, well, this is the guy who, made, Day of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead. And now he's making, another rom-com, kind of like, I don't know. Remember all those rom-coms that used to come out in the late 90s, early 2000s? Remember it was like every other month. It was always about like the very stressed out, successful businesswoman who meets this guy. And then, you know what I mean? You saw the commercials, like Hugh Grant was in like every single one of them. And you look at these commercials, you'd be like, well, or these trailers, and you'd say to yourself, well, Jesus, I wonder what's going to happen in this film.
Yeah, or Jude Law, Clive Owen and stuff. And all. Yeah. Although Closer was awesome. I thought Closer was, really good as far as those kind of movies go.
Yeah.
Of course, that was based on a play, and it was Mike Nichols, so it can't go wrong with that. But anyway, yeah, it makes me wonder. That I asked that question because of Romero and the whole, not wanting to get typecast in a way, just because it's something I'm having to consider now because of the first feature. Cam Girl was kind of like a suspense thriller, and very much I think filmmakers realize, I know that was my impetus, is that's an easy way to break in, if any of it can ever be easy, is you make a genre film because there's kind of a built-in market for it. Same for like family film or faith-based film, because there's just such a high demand and it doesn't necessarily require named actors for a distributor to say, okay, sure. But at the same time, I definitely want to make other things and have, other screenplays that are written that are in different genres but have a same through line. Like my whole thing is all the scripts that I've written, including Cam Girl, is very based on the whole man-woman thing, how relationships can really be a center of conflict and how it can be, the best thing and the best of times and the worst of times for if I could plagiarize that. But so that's why, like, even if I've written this romantic comedy that I'm hoping to get produced, it's still very much based on what I think I'm strong at, which is that character-driven stuff that deals with relationships and the good and the bad of it.
Yeah, I found that horror is a very good way to start your career. I found, look at Sam Raimi, for instance, George Romero, who we were just talking about. These guys all started in horror, and then, they were able to segue to other things. Romero, though, just to keep going back to George Romero, he can't segue out of that zombie stuff. The zombie genre that he invented. It's become like, that's, again, like I was just saying, that producer or a producer always comes up and says, hey, I have $1 million, but you have to do a zombie film, or I have $2 million, but you have to do a zombie film. Sam Raimi was able to segue out of that with Evil Dead 2, but he's done other things like Spider-Man, and that's an interesting sort of perspective, is how do you not get pigeonholed into certain things? Like, how do you not get pigeonholed where you're only doing one thing? You become typecast almost like an actor. Like, remember Jaleel White, who was Steve Urkel in Family Matters? Well, every role he was, he's Steve Urkel. So it's kind of like when he went to go audition, they were like, hey, man, Steve Urkel's auditioning for this movie. He's not going to get it because he's Steve Urkel, but, you know what I mean? It's stuff like that I understand completely what you're saying, and that's why when I think you're making films, I think it's always important to remember the genre. Like I said, again, going back to horror and starting off in horror, I think is an excellent idea. Let me give you a case in point too, Curt, because I had a friend of mine. He actually made a zombie film as his first movie, and it was actually pretty well received. and he followed it up with a romantic comedy. And all the distributors that he made friends with and everything else came back to him and said, "Hey, we hear you got another movie coming up, and what tell us about it?" And he told them the pitch, and he said literally you could see their faces just turn, like, so you're making a sappy romantic comedy now? Like, what happened to the horror stuff? And now he was like, well, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I want to make, a more professional film now. And basically it tanked. It literally, he said it was like DOA. And,
Right.
and that's something that, it's kind of like, well, if you do get pigeonholed, and let's just play worst case scenario here. If you do get pigeonholed where you can only make horror or only make zombie films, honestly, Curt, I think that's actually a fate. If I had that happen to me where I could only make one genre movies, I would be like, you know what? As long as I get to make movies for a living, you know what? I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. If any producers are listening, no, I'm not rejecting the genre. I just writing is really it for me, and I know for certain, having written the rom-com, for instance, is 30 Night Stand, and it's gotten good feedback. I've got 2 recognizable named actresses attached to it, so it gives me some vote of confidence that the trick of it is it just needs to be really good. Like in your friend scenario, that's sad, and it is an unfortunate common thing that the industry kind of resists it, and I understand. If you're gonna the fact of the matter is film business is a business. Primarily it's art, and we love it for the art, and that's why you want to really make sure it's something you're passionate about when you write a script, or especially go to into battle producing a feature. But you have to also realize from the beginning, the onset, it's a business first. So, if people buy a certain brand of soda, they expect a certain brand of soda when they purchase it again. And very much, when you're a professional actor or screenwriter, director, agents and everything, publicists, they expect you to be a brand, and I get that. So it's more of a matter of doing it gracefully, or when you make that transition, it is so impressive that people go, okay, you can do that. Like maybe if they saw the trailer first in your friend's scenario, let's say the movie was really outstanding, had a really solid hook, had, great production value, like it looked better than his first feature, just saying. If that was the case and they just saw the trailer first, then you know what? They'd be like, okay, it looks pretty good. It would be proof of concept in a way more than the concept of, oh, I'm doing something different. I can see the resistance, unfortunately, to that. It is a fine line.
Yeah, it is a fine line. And we were talking about your movie, Cam Girl. And, it's even before you shot Cam Girl, you actually, obviously, because I took a peek at your IMDb, one thing I wanted to bring up, and I think this is pretty important because it actually speaks volumes to me too, Curt, is I noticed that you have 3 director credits, and there was a 6-year span between the one short film and Cam Girl. Now, here's the thing. I get that. Like, I honestly, like, whenever I see a gap in anyone's resume, that's what happened. That happened to me, and I honestly, I understand. Things happen. You know what I mean? It's tough to get stuff going because everything in this business is time and money. It takes a lot of money to get to even get up to bat. I always say it's like this, Curt. It's like playing a game of home run derby. It takes so much practice and effort just to get up to the plate. And even if you're at the plate, that's just like making a project, and you have one shot to hit this ball out of the park. And you know what I mean? And it takes so much, training and stuff like that. And everything you do up until that point, till you get to that plate, is just practice. It's just refining your skills, refining a technique, finding your voice. You know what I mean? Finding your network. And then when you finally get up to that plate, you put that all into use. So, before you did Cam Girl, what were some of the other projects that you were working on, that actually sort of prepared you to make Cam Girl?
Well, that's an interesting point. I never really actually studied it's been like, what did you say, 6 years in between each thing or whatever?
What? Yeah.
Or it's like, oh my gosh, okay. Now that I think about it in that depth, I mean, it's more, first of all, I highly recommend making shorts first, because that is a proving ground. For one, you can call yourself a director before you actually take the big leap to direct a feature. Because let me tell you, it is different. It is unlike anything. When somebody does that for the first time, directs a feature film, and I'm not talking about doing it just on the weekends over the course of 6 months or whatever. We did it. I took a full month off of work. I was happy to do it at the time. I had a day job I wasn't too thrilled about. And it was just 5 days a week, weekends off, long days, not irresponsibly long days, but no, just really, nonstop, work. And it's just, by the end of it, you are exhausted. I mean, it's the most fulfilling thing. At the same time, it is the endurance test. So no, I highly recommend doing shorts first. In fact, that first short, which was, you might have seen then, credited, was Power Grab, which is actually an animated short, which I have a background in that. I got a bachelor's from University of Central Florida in computer animation. So that, I'm glad that I have that backing, because it is very much like filmmaking. What drew me to it is it's filmmaking without boundaries. Like, I would see how the visual effects was used in a movie like Fight Club, for instance, and how it just broke barriers. It's you can do things with a camera that a physical camera just can't do, and I just really kind of embraced that, was taken by it. So the thing that's important to note about that is, okay, so Power Grab came first. It was just a minute short. It played a festival or two, which was an amazing, ego boost, confidence builder, and it got me on IMDb. So that's the thing. It's what is the different steps? You want to be on IMDb, then you want to actually just prove more work in whatever avenue you're trying to get into, including what genre it is. The second short I did actually was because the writer who also produced it said, I wrote this because honestly he was interested and ended up working with me on Camgirl. But in the onset of that, as I was working on that, trying to get it financed, he said, oh yeah, no, I've got this short. Would you like to direct it? I'll give you X amount of dollars to go ahead and produce it and direct it. It was just a one-day shoot, and it was great. So it was like, in a way, my first paying job, you could say. It was somebody was saying, yes, I'll be your champion for this moment and give you X amount of dollars. I believe in your ability to direct this, and it was directed, and, so that's another step. So it's just a matter of different steps along the way, and if it takes, 3 years or whatever in between, so be it. I certainly wouldn't. I don't regret it at all, because it took, from the time I wrote the first solid draft of Camgirl, that was 2009. So then it took a solid 2 years trying to get the financing. But the whole time I was working on casting. I built the website to use that as a sales tool. I built a lookbook. I formed the company. You got to have an LLC or whatever, some business entity. Mm-hmm. You just have to do everything. You have to just do the work because everybody's got a script, and everybody's got a first script. It's important to note that, and this is important because this explains also the time cap, is Camgirl was my third feature-length screenplay. First screenplay I wrote, actually co-wrote with Curtis Norton, who ended up becoming my good friend and editor of Camgirl. That, got some recognition in contests, screenplay competitions. Blue Cat was a semifinalist in Blue Cat. It was same kind of thing, like semifinalist in the Creative Screenwriting magazine. That shows you how long ago it was or whatever. But
I remember Creative Screenwriting magazine.
Man.
Yeah, it actually was. It was actually really good.
It was right up there with like Script Mag.
Yeah, and all of a sudden I remember when it just kind of faded away, and I was like, oh damn, because I remember they had a really good. I still have the issue. It had Tarantino's Death Proof on the cover, and it was like an interview with him inside, and just really they had a previous issue with him too. It was a really good interview about his writing process. But I'm sorry to get off topic, Curt. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and just about placing those competitions. But actually, I want to hear more about. So you submitted the script of Camgirl to Blue Cat and actually placed. You said?
Oh no, that was the first. No, so
Okay.
sorry. So that was Tragic Kingdom,
Okay.
first screenplay I ever wrote, which is co-wrote. I haven't really co-written anything since that much, unless it's a writing for hire job, which happened recently. But so that Tragic Kingdom, is the one that we entered in contests and stuff, because at the beginning, that's what you need to do. You really need to just. At that time, I really had no connections at all. So I highly recommend that. Enter the main competitions, just like film festivals, start with the main ones, the Big Break, competition I think is still going on. Obviously the Nickel Fellowship, Sundance Labs, things like that. Go for the majors, because that's really what you want. You want something that really is a proving ground, because you're going against the best of the best. If you can get some kind of nod from those, you're onto something. And if not, write the next one. I've heard Jim Wools say that no, you need to. My advice to screenwriters starting out is write that first script, and then put it in a drawer, and then write the second script, and then when you're done writing that second script, yeah, you can go back and look at the first script and rewrite it and whatever, and see if there's something there. But I'm telling you, and I've seen it to be proof in my own work, is you get better with each time. And I think far too many people write that first script, they tell all their friends about it for about 15 years, it never gets produced, and they put all their eggs in that unfulfilling basket, and it's sad. But I understand why that could happen, because it is such a sense of accomplishment. It's like, oh, look what I did, and it is amazing, but you got to keep pushing forward. I think a lot of professional screenwriters, their first script does not get produced more often than not. And I think most of them will tell you, oh, thank God it didn't get produced, because, I wouldn't be, talking with you right now. So, or whatever it is. So it's, I wouldn't have a career. And, that there's something to that. I mean, people get better with practice, and the same goes for your craft as a screenwriter, director, actor, what have you.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I wanted to actually ask, we kind of touched upon this before, as we talk about writing screenplays. How did you, because you were working the 9 to 5 you mentioned when you were doing the short films, what were some of the things that you did? Because, I mean, when you got home from the 9 to 5, did you have a whole process in place? Like, hey, listen, I'm going to get home at 5. I'm going to maybe eat some dinner, and then from 7 to 8, I'm just going to write for an hour. Did you have like a set schedule like that?
The way I tend to work is I outline thoroughly, and that's very kind of at my own time. I do a lot of work at night. At the time when I worked the day job, I would get off at work at 11 p.m. and I'd be up to like 5 a.m. or whatever, writing, or doing other things, and then writing, and then going to sleep, waking up at noon, and starting all over again with the day job. So I would thoroughly outline first. So in the case of Camgirl, for instance, I spent about a year outlining and researching. And I did the whole Lawrence Kasdan method, with the note cards and the bulletin board. And I highly recommend people at least trying that, because it's free form. It's not something you're pigeonholed to. It's just putting down the thought so you don't forget it. So you end up with a big stack of cards, and you write down anything from lines of dialogue to, you definitely at least need a sentence describing what a scene's about. And then visual cues, symbolism, metaphor, any kind of thing that is going to be key components to any scene. And then you kind of just find a home for it on the bulletin board. So anyway, I did that. I even did things like read a great book by memoir by Diablo Cody, famous screenwriter Diablo Cody, who wrote Juno and Young Adult. Before that, she was actually a blogger about her experiences as being a stripper, and it was called Candy Girl. It was a phenomenal read. I recommend that. You can definitely see early on that first bit of work of hers that got published. This woman has talent. So that was a great way in to that world because I'm a guy and I don't know anything about about cam girl stuff. So, in all honesty, I mean, I stumbled upon the idea and knew that's what I need to write. But okay, now I really have to do it justice and try to get in the mindset. So yeah, a year of that, a year of researching, outlining, and I've done this with Cam Girl for the first time, and I've done it with many screenplays ever since, is once I'm ready, I start, and then I am fully disciplined, and I try to write a first draft as quick as possible. In the case of Cam Girl, I wrote it in 14 days. So 89 pages. It ended up being a little longer than that, but that first draft, 89 pages in 14 days, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. It was kind of cathartic. It just flew out of me like therapy, and I highly recommend it because for me, that just the energy and the kind of excitement that you have for it ends up on the page. It's just a matter of getting it all on the page and just rework it later. I mean, that first draft, no, is not something I ended up showing to anybody because it had, was littered with typos and sentences. And I'm like, wait a minute, okay, yeah, added this word, that word, but that's great. That's how, it just ends up, just becoming a flourish of this story, So I've definitely been doing that ever since. So yeah, just really doing the work beforehand so I know no matter what, I have this story. I really have a solid beginning, middle, and end. I know what it's all about. I know what the character motivations are. I know that it has a solid through line. I know what the theme is. It's not something that's overt, but it's all there. And let's get started, and I just get it done. And that's when when those 14 days, yeah, I was very disciplined from this time to that time, nonstop, while I'm not working. In fact, in that 14 days, I ended up calling off the day job 2 days. So I had a long weekend, and it was like one of the most, happy weekends I've had, So, no, it was very much disciplined from that regard.
So when you took those days off work and you were just writing, did you just turn your phone off too at the same time? Did you just basically say, I don't want to be bothered by anybody and just shut yourself up in your bedroom and just, notebook in hand and pen or laptop, whatever you had? So is that what you did, just eliminate all those distractions?
Yeah, and I didn't really have a reason to go on the internet because it was all written there. It was all there in the notes. It was all there at my disposal. With the rare exception of like, oh, I want to reference this weird thing or whatever, then I'd have to look up the word or something like that. And things like that, if it's some kind of like reference to the real world. But no, other than that, no internet, no phone, no, other than like maybe I tend to like listen to music, like classical music or commentary while I'm writing, something like that, just to it's like one of those fidget spinners in a way for my head, it keeps me focused, But other than that, no, there was no distractions or what people would call distractions.
Because, that's something I've noticed too with just writing screenplays, and even when you come home from a day job, and this is from a lot of different people who've been on the podcast and my own experiences, is that some days when you come home, you're either too tired. I had a friend of mine who was an AV guy, and he even on Facebook he would say, "My God, I don't have enough energy when I get home to even do anything. I just want to crash in front of the TV and pop open a beer and just start zoning out in front of the TV or whatever." And then other friends would say they come home and it's just they have a wife, they have kids, stuff like that, and it's just. It was always one thing after another, and then by the time they got some alone time, it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they have to be up at 6 o'clock the next morning. So there wasn't a lot of time to actually sort of write this out. Just hearing I hate to use the word hacks, but I guess I should probably use the word hacks. So to sort of hack the process, they would do stuff like writing whenever they can. On the lunch break at work, they take their phone out and start writing on that. They would take their phone and record audio as they're driving to work. Writing little notes in the shower using Aqua Notes, which is something I've actually picked up too, by the way. Seriously, $8 on Amazon. You can actually write in the shower. It comes with a pencil, waterproof pad, everything. It's amazing. But stuff like that, that way you can sort of at least get some writing done, and you're not sort of just keep putting it off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, whatever you got to do. That's what I mean. I've heard other people say, look at it this way: if all you do is write a page a day, by the end of the year you'll have two screenplays done or whatever, whatever it is. If you devote just 1 hour a day or 3 hours a week, however it breaks down. I mean, you don't need to be that formulaic with it. If it helps you, then by all means. Everybody's process is their own. But no, it's a matter of just finding the time. And yeah, we have it's the best time in a way to be a filmmaker or a writer, because yeah, you do have these apps, you do have this technology that's easily affordable. But at the same time, it's just the most crowded time to ever try to break in. So you really have to have that hook. You have to have that high concept that's going to get out there, and you got to just put in the time.
So yeah, and that's so true. We have to, you have to put in the time, and actually, getting the hardest part of the process. Somebody once told me, Curt, is actually getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And once you can get that sort of pushing that stone up the hill like Sisyphus, you can keep pushing it up there. But the hardest part is actually starting. So let's talk about starting Cam Girl. So you have the script written. Where does it finally come together? Where you have the script, and you say to yourself, you know what, this is the time. Everything sort of came together. So how did you go about finding the right time to do this and starting to cast this project? So was it finally? Did you finally maybe get the right amount of money? Did you finally maybe find the right actress? Did you finally maybe find the right location? So what sort of came together for you at the right time for you to make Cam Girl last year?
Well, that's an interesting way to. Okay, this is a very good question. Basically, what happened was what I was alluding to earlier is I did all I could pre-production first. I'd be casting. I'd be doing all I can, hoping that the financing will eventually come. And I just knew in the back of my head, if I didn't get the money by now, I would have found a way to, Clerk style, El Mariachi style, Following by Christopher Nolan style, get it made on my own resources, my own, by any way I could. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that because after several years of doing all that, I would, in the process of casting everywhere online on those, usual listing boards, the Craigslist, the Mandy's, all that stuff. I would put the casting notices, with the link to the website that, like I said, was kind of like a sales tool. I'd kind of list what the casting was for. At the very head of it all, it had the log line. It was very much an intentional way to pitch what the script was. And in doing so, I actually had a producer contact me, emailed me out of the blue, and said they'd like to read the script. And that was Jay Aubrey. He ended up becoming one of the two executive producers of Cam Girl within 2 weeks. He said he loved the script, wanted to send it to another friend of his, and it was a business partner that he's worked with, Odorico Mendez, and he was the other executive producer. And between the two of them, they got it financed, and it all quickly happened after that. Immediately after that, money was, sent, and we just looked forward to have a production date, and everything was, by that time, the ship was pretty well steered in the right direction. So because I used all that time, to be prepared, I had storyboards, I had shot lists, I had promotional stills. They didn't end up becoming promotional stills we used for the final feature, but it was a sales tool. You need that kind of stuff for your lookbook and pitch documents, and that just helps you understand the world and the look, what you're going for. So no, use that time to your advantage. I wouldn't, if this is your first shot, if this is really going to be your resume film, don't rush into it is what I'd suggest, because you only got the one, in a way. I mean, if it's really so bad that it just kind of dies at the vine, you can take it off IMDb or something, or try to. But For the most part, no. You really don't want to rush into that first break you get. Treat it like your resume, because that's usually what happens with these things.
Yeah, you mentioned dying on the vine. That's kind of, I've heard that so many times. Projects, the money's there, they're about to shoot, and then everything just falls apart. And it's like, well, we did everything right, and it still fell apart. And I mean, and I want to get back to talking about Camera Girl, by the way, in 1 second. I just want to tell you a little anecdote, Curt. I once had a friend of mine, and he wrote a script that he was hoping to pitch to people, and he wrote it, and I read it, and it wasn't anything crazy. Meaning there was no real set pieces that were going to be expensive, nothing that I could think of that was going to be outrageous. And he said, well, if I can't get it, produced by somebody, I'm going to produce it myself, even if I have to shoot it in my backyard. And I said, see, that's the spirit. I said, that's what you got to have. And he said, thank you, Dave. And well, he went off. Nobody wanted to produce it, so he said he was going to shoot it in his own backyard. And I said, I'm always for it. I said, you should always, follow your dream. And if it's a project you want to make, don't let anybody tell you no. Make your project. Well, he came back to me, and Curt, he told me, all right, I'm going to need $500,000 to shoot this thing. And I said, it's 4 guys in a freaking living room at a house. I said, why the hell do you need $500,000? I said, nothing. And I said, there's no explosions. There's no blood. There's no gunshots. There's no special effects. I said, what the hell are you using $400,000 or $500,000 for? And he said,
it need to be shot on IMAX, Dave. I mean,
well, it's funny because he actually got a director of cinematography that came with a package. It was like a Red X at the time, I think, or whatever it was at the time, or Red Dragon, and he was like, okay, we'll shoot it on that. But I was like, how much money is this guy charging you? Like, where the hell is this $500,000? And then he was, like, well, maybe if I could get this actor in it. I said, dude, it's 4 guys in a living room. Unless, you're best friends with, I don't know, Shia LaBeouf or something. I said, it's not, they're not going to be able to pull all these guys together. I said, he wanted to have this. So finally, I said, dude, you could shoot this over the weekend, bit by bit. And then I said, for literally probably $200-$300 a day, a little more if you get a professional director of cinematography like the one he had selected with the red kit. And I said, it wouldn't cost you anywhere near this. And then you could just put it online for free and have people just, check it out. Because after all, this isn't really, this is more like a passion project and not a commercially viable product. And honestly, if I if you're gonna, like we were talking about before, if you know the difference between the two, and I think that's you have to know the difference between the two. If one's a commercially viable product, something like Night of the Living Dead, something like Cam Girl, that's going to have an audience, it's going to have a niche, that's going to have a selling point, it's going to have a unique selling position, aka unfair advantage. Versus something that, hey, look, I just want to shoot a film because if I don't shoot it now, or if I don't shoot it in a couple months or a year or whatever, I'm probably never going to shoot one because I'm going to always be spinning my wheels and talking about shooting a film. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think there's 2 different elements to that. One is casting, and as far as pre-production is concerned, casting is probably 90% of the game. I've heard the expression go, the director's job, or as far as shepherding a production is casting is 90% of it, because if you're not with the actors, if you don't believe the acting, you're not going to believe anything, no matter how good the composer is, no matter how good your DP is, no matter how good the writing is. We felt very fortunate, and I'm glad that we took our time, especially in finding all of our cast, but especially the 2 leads, Erin Nicole Klein as Jessica. The lead was just outstanding. She was local talent. Everybody on Cam Girl was local cast and crew at the time. Half of them have since moved to either California or Georgia. But anyway, Joe Coffey, the male lead, I think was phenomenal, and both of them have gone on to great things. So no, we felt I couldn't have done it without those people, and I'm glad I took the time in casting to get people I knew could really just knock it out of the park. They're not names as far as Hollywood's concerned, but it has to just stand out as good acting. As long as it stands out as good acting, yeah, it's going to be really hard to get Sandra Bullock or Steve Buscemi in your four people in a room movie. I mean, if you have no experience or connections, I mean, you have to be realistic. At the same time, you really need to realize that, okay, how can I get the best talent I can find for this? Because that is really crucial. I've seen far too many movies, low budget movies, that it's just like, even if it's just one of the lead actors or actresses that just fall short, it just really kind of takes the air out of the tires of the whole project.
Yeah, it's so true, and one of the other things. I mean, see, and that's the other thing we're talking about with all the actors. Once actors keep going on, and different people in the project move on. Things that I've worked on, I hear about them moving out to L.A. I met these two girls on a film set. They were like, "Oh, maybe we're going to get into film. We don't know." And I said, some people have this romantic idea of filmmaking, and they get in there for a day, Curt, and they go running away screaming, like they think it's going to be a fairy tale. And they're like, "Oh my god, holy shit!" So they, but they ended up, both of them, moving to L.A. And I was like, "Hey, listen, more power to you. If you can do that, more power to you." And I haven't heard from them since, but I'm not, I have so many friends who've moved out to LA, and honestly, let's be honest here, Curt, I'm probably going to move out there at some point. I don't know when. Probably when I get, a little more things under my belt, because I know if I go out there, I will probably end up, living in the gutter. But I want to make sure, I have something to show for all this years I'm putting into it. And But it is just that's why I always say your network is your net worth. And honestly, when all these people go to these networking parties and everything else, you never know who you're going to bump into. That's why you should only burn a bridge if you're absolutely certain you don't need to cross that again. It's something like that old saying goes. It's something like you can burn a bridge if you never have to cross it twice. And But and that's the thing, and they go into other projects, and it kind of ties in with what I'm trying to get at here. It's I know there are screenwriters and producers, and actually more and more screenwriters, who heard you say that about the two producers who found your script, and they're probably like, "I can't believe Dave didn't talk about that more. Damn it!" So I want to just tie in. We're talking about networking and all the actors from Cam going in different directions and in commercials. So. And tying with your network is your net worth. So tying into that, when those two producers found you, or that one producer found you just randomly, was he just looking for on those boards just for like a budding filmmaker or a budding screenwriter or something like that, just to sort of see what's out there?
Yeah, he was. We're talking about Jay Aubrey here. Yeah, he actually has a long history, decades of working. He actually worked with Roger Corman. His father was very prominent filmmaker, in the film industry. So no, he was looking for somebody to be the next champion for, and he just kind of saw my post and sent the email, and the rest was kind of a good history for me. So, but yeah, it was a very interesting story. Would that happen if I tried to do it all over again today? Who knows? I'm sure that stuff is a little different, but no, it's free advertising. It just goes to show you any way you can get your concept out there. Once it's copywritten and ready to go, wait for that at least. But yeah, once it's done, do everything you can to get it out there using these resources you have. Because I know we've always heard the common saying as far as production goes, you can make it good, fast, or cheap, 2 out of the 3. I'd like to introduce one that I live by, a totally different trifecta for more for low budget filmmakers to consider, is you have time, money, and resources. So you can have 2 of those 3 things are, what you have to really kind of latch onto. In the case of Camgirl, we had the resources and we had time, to be honest. I mean, I'm glad that we had enough money to get it done, and we paid people, but it was really more a matter of taking all that time that I had, the years and years, to really maximize the resources. And you'd look at movies like Clerks and Following, etc., where they wrote the script based on what they even had available as far as locations and everything. So to some degree, I definitely did that. I mean, it's easy to find a house or condo, so people in your cast and crew, especially when they're paid, they're willing to, maybe work with you on something like that. Oh, I've got this place or my friend's place or whatever. So no, it's a matter of that. I definitely look at it, especially if it's a low budget film. You got your time, money, and resources. How are you going to utilize two of those three?
Yeah, and I like that perception, by the way. That sort of time, money, and the quality, the speed, and the cost, and sort of changing that to fit with indie film standards. Because we've both seen this, Curt. You meet somebody who wants to make an indie film for like $5,000, $10,000, whatever. And they're talking about like, all right, I'm going to have this period piece, and I'm going to, we're going to be back in the 1600s. You're like, what? A feature-length film? What? And you saw that thing I posted on Instagram recently that I took from Gorilla Producer, a.k.a. Calvin, where it's like you're trying to explain to people how your music video is not going to cost $500. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just too much is involved with this. To sort of, just say, oh, yeah, we can get by with, $100 or whatever. And I don't know why I even just thought of this, but I want to bring this up too. I actually had a friend of mine who did an online radio show before that was even a thing. And I haven't talked to this guy in years, but he had it and then what happened was he would record it. It was an online radio show. You could listen to it, and you could also watch it because they had cameras in the room, kind of like Camgirl, by the way. And and then what happens is you could also listen to it later on as a podcast. And I mean, this is before everyone was doing it, And he would try to act like he could charge these exorbitant rates when like nobody was watching. Like he had like 2 viewers one night, one of which was me, and he was like talking about like, hey, I should charge like $1,000 for an ad space here. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, where do you get this stuff from? But it's sort of like, I think some people have expectations, and then when their expectations doesn't meet reality, they have to change their perception, because otherwise they're just going to just be miserable about everything. You know what I mean? They're always going to be those people who are just saying like, oh my God, if only I could find $10,000 or $20,000. I don't know. Maybe they could change the movie and shoot it a little differently. And one of the things that you mentioned too is when the crew and the cast see you, meaning like you as the director and writer and producer, have this. You have a great attitude. You're willing to work hard, and the thing is, and this is true with pretty much any project I've ever been on. If the producer, director, writer, whoever's leading the ship, sometimes like you and me, Curt, we wear all 3 hats. If you don't care about the project more than everybody else, people can sense that, and if they sense that, their willingness and their willingness to sort of go that extra mile diminishes by like rapidly by the day. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And not only that, to kind of expand on what you were talking about earlier about, people, where are you getting these numbers from? You should charge this and that. I think it's this crowdfunding mentality where it just is, it's like a plague. People think, just because, Spike Lee could do it. Yeah, it's Spike Lee. It's like he got over $1 million because it's, but it's a matter of, with crowdfunding, it's about the rewards. It's not a matter of what you're taking, but there's this kind of me first mentality that filmmakers need to kind of get away from if they really want to get a start. I have the opposite philosophy. It's about giving first. I mean, obviously within reason. If it's one-sided with a certain then you can stop on that avenue, but it's giving first, and you'd be amazed how many other people eventually down the road, I do have this concept, how about you write this screenplay, I'll pay you, or whatever, or I've got this one producer, he'd be really interested in this the script that you told me about a year ago. Like, you'd be amazed how often that is how it works, and that is a great way of networking, is what are you doing for this person first? That's just like the agent client relationship. It's a symbiotic thing. It's like, what are you doing for the agent? That's why they want to know what your brand is. They already want you to have some kind of reputation. Like, you have a reason for them to want you. Like, you've already put in the time. You've got studios interested in whatever script or project it is, or YouTube video you made, etc. So no, it's very much. I look at networking that way. It's like it's a giving first thing, and seeing what comes in. What goes around comes around to some degree.
Yes. that is my philosophy in networking as well. I always, always extend out, hey, this is why I think we should talk, or we should meet, and this podcast has been an extension of that. I've always been one of my strongest skills, Curt. Some people just have these, skills that they've accumulated and it sort of ends up becoming a strength. And one of them has been networking. And for me, and one of the things that I've learned is that, you have to sort of offer up some value. And if it's not reciprocated, which, let's just be honest, sometimes in the film industry, it's not reciprocated. So you just have to, you just have to sort of let it go and just be like, all right, that's their karma. If they don't want to reciprocate that, that's fine. But next time I'm not going to, next time I don't know if I'm going to actually be so willing to help them out. And that's why I always tell people in this industry, you have to have a good attitude. Honestly, Curt, I've worked on some of these film sets, man, and it has just been egomaniacs out of the gate. And I'm like, you guys haven't done anything. How we're making a small indie film here that is literally all free. Like, everything's free. Like, we have the location for free. Everyone's working for free. The cast is working for free. And I'm like, we're shooting this with like a potato, and I'm like, and everyone's like, oh, this is going to be a YouTube hit. We're going to have 1 million hits. In retrospect, I've looked at that, and I realize you do have to have that attitude that it is going to lead to something. But I think as we go back to expectations, hey, it's going to be 1 million hits on YouTube. The reality of it is, if it doesn't hit that, hey, you know what? At least we tried. It shouldn't be this like blinded fervor, if you know what I mean, that sort of like leads a lot of people astray. Because I mean, you've been on those movies, Curt, where people, you work on a project and some people have that attitude where they're like, hey, this is the big thing that's going to win Sundance. We're all going to be multimillionaires living in mansions in Bel Air, and it's all going to be because of this film. And I honestly, I think it's a double-edged sword type of attitude, because you want people to be positive, but you also don't want people to sort of lose grasp of reality, if you know what I mean.
It's like that movie. This is a very obscure reference, mind you, so pardon, but it's like that movie. It's like that movie, The Great White Hype. It's all this. You build this expectations, and it kind of builds upon itself, and then you better deliver, and then it's like the biggest letdown in the world when it doesn't. Although that's the movie that did the opposite. But anyway, that was kind of the joke of it. It turned it on its head, but. It's just about that. You don't really, what I was saying earlier, especially if it's a smaller project, and really, especially if it's people volunteering their time, one, you better be to the nicest to them, super nice to them, and thank them for their work, and let them know it's appreciated. Because if you're able to get people to work for you for free and it comes out watchable, that's amazing. That's a miracle in itself. It's already a miracle producing a feature or whatever it is, a short. It's really hard to get quality work and people with experience to do quality work for free. I mean, I have different philosophies about people that do that, and I've still done work for free, but I'm eventually going to really just stop doing that unless it's a very close friend or something. Anyway, very much you gotta it's about demeanor. You want to be respectful to people, because again, it goes maybe a year later when they remember working with you. If you were act like that, they probably don't want to work with you again, or especially when you don't live up to the hype, which is very possible when it's this crowded of an industry. It's just it really kind of looks bad. It should be about, this is a great story to tell. I'm glad you're all here to help tell it with me. Let's go to work. Action.
Yes.
Yes. So it starts with that, because, like I said, Camroll took well over from start to finish, from the first screenplay to actual now in distribution. It's taken 4 years, well over 4 years. We consider the development process, the year, 5 years. So you have to really want to tell a story and really have your heart behind it, because you got to really get through all that time. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to take that long, but it could, at very least, it should take post-production, everything. If you don't have a lot of money at your disposal, it'll take years before you get from A to B on that.
Yeah, and that's sort of that perseverance. You got to keep sort of punching it through. And You know, and that's sort of goes back to what I was talking about with my friend of mine, where it's like, you know, if you want to make it in your own backyard, hey, more power to you. It's kind of like that film Buried. You know, they were going to actually shoot that in somebody's backyard because, hey, you know what, they could do it. And this is before, you know, he had a whole, like, they had a film crew obviously and everything, but they were saying like, hey, I wrote this movie about a guy in a coffin. I could shoot this in my backyard. It doesn't have to be any, you know what I mean? So. If you haven't seen Buried, by the way, everyone listening, fantastic movie. One location, you know, and it's really, really interesting how they shot that. But you know, Curt, just to get back to Cam Girl, I wanted to actually mention, you know, what was some of the, you know, what was some of the maybe the toughest obstacle you had to overcome in actually in the actual shooting of Cam Girl? Is there anything unexpected that may have happened on set that sort of like threw everything into a like disarray, or anything that sort of happened that just sort of like put a wrench in the works?
Well, no matter how prepared you get, you'll still have things that just really are like, what the bleep, you know? A few examples of that. I had that main location that we had where all the action happens. Well, first, very quickly, the log line. Cam Girl's a suspense film. It's available everywhere. You know, Amazon on DVD. It's about Jessica, a single mother who works as a webcam stripper who is pushed to her limit when held hostage by an unknown gunman. Basically, so it's mostly in this one location where the house where that, you know, conflict takes place, where that hostage situation takes place, and it's very much over the phone, kind of in the vein of it was a combination of phone booth and film I really love called Hard Candy. Anyway, so that main location, we actually leased it out for that month, and when we leased it, it was completely empty. So we dressed that place, you know, from top to bottom. It was all just carpets and walls. So when we moved in, we only had about 2 days to prep everything, get it going. You know, have the power set up, have, you know, the water set up, because we needed all that stuff, the working shower, etc. You know, sinks, everything. So once we finally got it all up and running. The first day of production, we needed the wardrobe cleaned, so I wanted to, you know, wash the main wardrobe that we see, the kind of pajamas, the iconic, you know, stuff for the character. So I quickly, you know, wash it just so it's not, you know, wrinkled and everything. And come to find out, the washer that was left in there and had other tenants and everything used or whatever prior to that, it would just filled up and that's all it would do. It just filled up with water and just was like a moat. So I found out hours later, what the heck? And now the actresses showed up, we're ready to go, you know, everything's set up, and this clothes, you know, I realized, you know, we're about to start in a little bit, and now we've got this soaking wet clothes. And what am I going to do now? The washer doesn't work. So basically I quickly threw it out on basically on the inside the car outside. It was a hot summer day in Florida, so I put it out in the back seat of my car, so the sun was beaming in there, and I took one of our reflectors and reflected sun going into the back of this car, and the DP shows up at that time he just parks and passes my car, and he's like, what is all this stuff doing? I had to explain, I had to dry this stuff somehow, and because the dryer's not working, this washer, it doesn't work, so it just left the soapy water collecting on our wardrobe that we're going to need in an hour. So it's just like, that's one thing. Another thing, we had a location fall out at the last minute, and I ended up having to talk them into reminding them, okay, fine, I'm giving you how much money, I'll give you a little more, can we film tomorrow? Okay, fine. So we had a cover set at main location for that day. I had to immediately call everybody and reschedule actors that were needed that day for a different day, and bring in the core actors to the main location, and we'll film this scene and that scene. So that became a short day, but we still kept the momentum. We got something done. So that, in a way, was our cover set. That kind of thing is more often like if you're doing exteriors, you definitely want to have that early in the schedule, so you're able to utilize cover sets if it's really bad weather or what have you. But in that case, it was because the location fell out. So you just don't know. You need to be prepared for anything. And that's also why you need to be fully prepared as much as possible before you start, because you're going to still have fires to put out.
Yeah, you are always going to have fires to put out. That's something I found and it's a lot of it has been, in my experience, been like people dropping out, like key crew members, and I have to kind of fill those roles myself. That's been a big fire that I've noticed a lot, and it's sort of like, hey, your location manager dropped out. Okay, now you're, now your associate producer dropped out. Okay, and now this guy dropped out. Okay, now I'm the caterer, I'm the this and the that, and I'm also the director, and I wrote the freaking thing, and it's just it's just one thing after another, and you're just trying to juggle what you are at that point in time. So and it's just just trying to sort of get through it, so to speak. But it's so good that, I actually was going to ask you too. You just answered that question, was about how did you actually film this movie, and if you actually just rented out one location, which is you just answered that, because I've actually seen other people do that too, where they've actually just rented a house for maybe a month or so. I know, as odd as this is going to sound, the movie that I just recently watched that made me think of that was D.B. Cooper versus Bigfoot. And basically they rented a house for like a month and shot the whole film in there. By the way, do not watch D.B. Cooper versus Bigfoot. It was terrible. So Curt, do not actually try to find that movie. It was god awful. But it just made me think of hey, they rented a house for a month. But no, I actually liked Cam Girl. I thought it was a really cool idea. It reminded me of Phone Booth. You said Hard Candy. It reminded me of Phone Booth or even Devil, more so than Hard Candy.
Yeah, it was a combination of both. I thought I said both, Phone Booth and Hard Candy.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed. Sorry about that. So, sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
I don't know. I'm thinking I said, but I don't. We have to go back. Let's go to the videotape. But
let's get the instant replay.
But no, I'm pretty sure. I mean, you're absolutely right, and that definitely was. Both were, I mean, why I said Hard Candy is the whole dynamic between the male and female character. That's kind of where I was going, I guess, with that one. How it's very contained and very adversarial that way, and kind of breaks down the cliches that you might have about the genders there. So that's kind of where I was, but definitely I can see Phone Booth, absolutely. That was a definite inspiration. Really, all these. I mean, you mentioned. I was so wanting to mention when you brought it up with Chris Sparling's Buried. Yeah, I thought that was very tactful, very good. People should look at that. They should also look at his other work, ATM. It's another very contained.
Oh yeah, ATM.
Film, and I thought that was great. In fact, I think that was better than Buried. It was definitely. Because it had bigger scope because it was 3 people in a small contained space, but it just goes to show you that he became the contained thriller guy, and he embraced it. And I think it is really interesting to know that yes, he wrote that script intending to, no matter what, if he had to, make it himself. And there was this other movie called Coffin, which is a lesser scene, and it's it's okay, but it's just very low budget and just isn't quite what Buried is. Then again, it doesn't have Ryan Reynolds inside the coffin. Also, what's really fascinating is I was amazed to find out that Buried was shot in 21 days. It's like it's one guy in a coffin the whole time, and it was shot in 21 days. Wow, they really, it goes to show you they took their time. They could have probably done that in less. There's another movie called Break, which is one actor, Steven Dorff, I believe. He's inside a trunk of a car. He's kind of held hostage. There's this terrorism type plot, and he's held hostage inside of a trunk, and it's just like there's this ticking clock, and each time it triggers something else. It ratchets up the suspense, what's going to happen to him, because they're wanting him to do something. The people that are driving are holding him hostage. I mean, just look at these kind of movies, realize, okay, how can I make a story like this that I really feel passionate about, that is unique, that takes advantage of the same kind of things that these movies do, is what I'd suggest if you're trying to break in, because it's about budget. You need to get that first credit. That's the thing. I'm very appreciative that I have my first credit as a writer director. I've got first credit for features now on visual effects and things like that, so I can really it's like a plumber. If you're gonna need some plumbing work done, are you gonna just have your buddy say, "Oh yeah, I know somebody down the street. Has he done anything before?" No, he works as a an accountant, but he likes to do plumbing on the side. Are you going to bring that person in to work on the pipes? Or are you going to call somebody in that your friend said, oh no, he did an amazing job. He's been doing it for years. You need, if you don't trust somebody with your pipes, you don't trust somebody, with your screenplay. Who's going to give you your, $800,000 right off the bat? Why would they decide to do that? Why would they take that risk? So you got to look at it from that way. It's very much realizing you have to start somewhere, and writing something that's very marketable, that you still feel great about telling, that's within a budget is a great avenue.
Yeah, it sort of goes back to what we're talking about too, with the whole, trying to make a time travel movie for like $50 or whatever the hell it was, or let's make a period piece movie for $5,000.
Sci-fi, but I mean, you can look at a movie like Primer. That's the thing. A brilliant movie like Primer, for instance, is super low budget and it's sci-fi. Like it was so unique and high concept, and it was started from the ground up in a way that would work, for a budget, and that's why it got the attention. That's why it was a hit at Sundance,
Yeah, exactly. And it was very internal, very psychological. And it was, for those of you who haven't seen Primer, it was a time travel movie that was made for like $7,000. And basically it's about a guy who in his garage makes a time machine, and he keeps going like back and forth. And the movie too, where it's like, you really have to pay attention. And I hate using that phrase. You really have to pay attention to this movie, Curt. Like, you should be on your you should be on your phone, or you know what I mean. But the fact is, it jumps back and forward a lot. It jumps forward, jumps backwards, and you kind of have to sort of piece this together. It's really, really cool. And exactly. It depends upon what you do with it. It's there's an article I actually just tweeted out about maybe yesterday, where it was the difference between an amateur using pro gear and a pro using amateur gear. And the sort of concise is, the camera doesn't make the photographer makes the camera just helps you get that vision.
Yes.
So and that's sort of where we're sort of going with, don't really focus on gear a lot. Yeah, I honestly, and because honestly, Curt, I mean, I'm sure when you were filming Cam Girl, you could have just simply went into a computer, typed in gear for rent, and you would have had probably 10 million hits, because everybody has these camera packages. Don't use a DSLR, use a red. No, don't use a red, use an area flag. You know what I mean? It's just, you can just keep going down this wormhole of gear and stuff like that. But you really have to, I say, find out what your project is and really play to that, which is what Primer did. And and really just sort of go from there. And I think you don't have to worry about finding the latest gear and shooting in 4K or IMAX or whatever, because most people are never going to see your movie in 4K or IMAX, because most of the monitors that we have nowadays, like 99% of them on the planet aren't 4K. You know what I mean? So this obsession with just this high res and everything else is just sort of detracting from actually making the movie. You know what I mean? Because they're always chasing the next big thing in the gear market. But I want, and then I actually want to ask you too, Curt. You have a few projects. Again, I was looking at your IMDb, things that are announced. So I wanted to ask Curt. With Cam Girl out now, it's on Amazon Prime, and I wanted to ask you, what are some of your other projects that you have out that you're working on right now?
Well, yeah, it's very much what is the next thing. Like I was saying, just from the writing standpoint, it's keep moving on, and the same thing with things you're trying to get in production. So I've got 30 Night Stand, which is a rom-com, and that was what I wrote kind of after Cam Girl. Was kind of my answer to that, and I kind of wanted to do something different with that. I've heard it called, it's like a rom-com with an edge. Basically, the logline is tensions rise and sparks fly when a woman is cunning enough to turn a one-night stand into an opportunity to live with a man rent-free. So it kind of like... It's very much deals with the kind of generation I'm in now, people in their 30s and everything. There's this big thing about, you need to have a house, and what kind of house do you have? And, you're renting? Okay, or who's living with you? Or you got roommates and you're 35, whatever, it's like some people might have a problem with that. It's other people like, no, I think it's the best thing, going for me right now. It's like, you don't understand, So, I mean, it's very much, and there's all this kind of, what really kind of triggered the idea was this talk about, the term, I guess, is like kind of like forced ownership in a way, where there's kind of like this strange stuff where people can kind of claim ownership if they've been there for 7 years or whatever, and it's been dormant. There's kind of weird legal stuff, and it's also like if it takes a different direction than with 30 Night Stand. It's not that, but I mean, there's all this kind of weird stuff as far as vacancies and squatters and living arrangements, and I kind of just tried to make a funny situational rom-com out of that. Of course, it's the conflict ensues because they're stuck there for 30 days. He gives her a notice to vacate, and now they hate each other. It starts off as this great love affair for one night, but they woke up. so then it's like, what happens after that? And it kind of ebbs and flows and goes from there. So that's that, and I'm very happy I've got Annika Marks attached to that so far, and she was in The Sessions with Helen Hunt. Also have Serena Vincent to play alongside her, and she's known from like Cabin Fever, of course, the original, and other genre movies like Tales from Halloween and stuff like that. So that's that one. And then another one I'd like to talk about is Anxiety, and that was actually originally I wrote as a play script, so now I have a 2-act play script. I'm trying to try my hand at that because I am, like I said, my strength is kind of character-driven stuff, dialogue centric. And Anxiety is loosely based on a true event that happened. Basically, a manic claustrophobic woman gets locked inside an office building bathroom after hours, along with a male janitor. So it's just based on this true events, not the story itself. It departs from it very much. Where this woman was trapped in this office building on a Friday night in Washington, and she is so claustrophobic that when the news articles didn't explain why she got locked in there, but she got locked in this bathroom, and it took her 8 hours. She eventually she broke the wooden chair inside there, used the wooden chair to pry at the metal handle on the inside of the front door of the bathroom. The thing snapped off, so now she doesn't have, even a handle. But she takes that handle that snapped off from the inside and uses it as a chisel. And she first tried to chisel through the sidewall. Why, I don't know, but she tried to do that, and she couldn't because it became solid after she got through the drywall and all. So then eventually she burrowed the same kind of hole, but right beside the door, reached on the other side, stuck her arm through the wall and unlocked it from the other side, and eventually escaped that way. So it took that concept and really kind of went in a different direction with it because there's somebody else stuck in there with her, and of course they start blaming each other and are forced to to deal with each other, and how are we going to get out of this mess? And it's just, again, deals very much with gender and even a possible love interest going on. It's just very fun. So that was actually adapted to a screenplay as well. So, I have that as a 2-act play script and a feature that I hope to get going, and that's very much contained. And I think it also helps that it's inspired by true events, because they like having that, distributors like being able to put that on a poster or a DVD box, which I get.
Yeah, I remember talking to friends about stuff like that. Like whenever you're at, remember video stores? But whenever you go to a video store and you would see that stuff. And by the way, yes, everyone, I know video stores still exist. I'm just making a joke. That actually came up, by the way, Curt. I had a guest on, and I also had people email me like, Dave, video stores still exist, right? I'm like, yes. I was making a little levity, guys. Come on.
Yeah, there's 102 Blockbusters left, but yeah, they exist.
Yeah,
but, I actually worked at one. I worked at a Hollywood Video, so I could try to claim. Me and Tarantino, yeah. We have the same, not so much, but yes, I did a stint at a video store, and it was awesome. It's about the perk of having movies. I was able to check out movies before they were on the shelves. That was the coolest executive privilege in the world. I was able to take home a movie a week before it's available to the public. It was yes.
That is so cool. You know what? It's funny. I actually had a friend of mine who worked at a Hollywood Video, and we got to go in there and rent some movies. And we actually rented a movie called Bloody Murder, which is produced by. It was like the first movie produced by Mark Bienstock, who I ended up being his TA when he taught here at Drexel here in Philly, when he was producing M. Night Shyamalan's Split, and he ended up coming on the podcast too, and Mark and I were talking about it, and I was like, imagine how small of a world that is, that was the movie we grabbed, and then end up, 15 years, 20 years later, we end up, working together. I mean, my God, but yeah, I'm sorry not to get too off track. Sorry, but yeah, no, it's just cool that you got to work at that Hollywood Video, and yeah, there are still some blockbusters around, but just to go back with what you're talking about, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, where they can put on that inspired by true events, right on the poster, and that sort of goes back to the unique selling position, right? You always have to find a way to stand out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's what they did for Fargo, and it wasn't even true, I believe.
Exactly.
Like some people, I heard some tragic story, like somebody actually, I think, passed away because they were searching for this money out in the middle of nowhere or something like that. I mean, it's just like, oh, geez, oh yeah, by the way, it was not true. Sorry.
Yeah, that's actually a true story. They actually made a movie about it. It's called like Riko the Treasure Hunter, or Hariko. It's a Japanese woman legitimately came to America looking for that money that Steve Buscemi's character actually buried in Fargo, buried in that long wooden fence in the middle of nowhere with no markers whatsoever, which is kind of funny that he takes the ice scraper and puts it on there, because that was the only marker he could get, because it's a vast wasteland, and she actually legitimately came to this country looking for that and ended up dying looking for it. So
I just need to find this isolated house with this wood chipper in the back, and then I've got a frame of reference. That's all I need.
Yeah, and honestly, the movie was actually pretty good. But I mean, obviously, Fargo's a masterpiece. But also the other movie, I forget the actual name, but it's called it's something The Treasure Hunter, and it was actually pretty good because it was about this isolated woman living this terrible life, and she figures, what, why not just go to America and look for this treasure? And I don't know if her life in real life was that bad, but I do know that she did go to this country looking for treasure and didn't find it, obviously, because it doesn't exist. But you know what, Curt? I honestly think this has been such a great chance to speak with you. I know we met online, and it's so great being able to to meet people like you. And because we've been talking for about an hour and 20 minutes now, and I just want to sort of wrap this whole conversation up. Is there any sort of parting thoughts that you have for everybody, or anything that you want to discuss and we get a chance to?
Yeah, thanks. Super quick, because you talk about the net worth and everything is what you're worth. I mean, I recently have to just give a shout out to a novelist that I became friends with, E.A. Stripling. She's got a novel series, Internal Conflict is the first one, and I just really have been inspired by how she kind of just took me in, and after just contacting each other and talking back and forth, and I really like what she does online and to promote her stuff, and we just are probably going to continue to collaborate. So it's all just about making those connections and taking opportunities to bring them up, when you get a chance, because she sings my praises, and it's like, oh wow, you said that, that's so nice, thank you. But so final thoughts, I honestly did have a question for you if we have time right after this. But really, sure. it just all comes down to, I really just have to reiterate that you have to really have your heart in it, because I know you've heard other people say the advice, like they say, is there anything else you'd like to do besides filmmaking, law, whatever, a doctor, okay, pursue that, because it would be infinitely easier than working in that. I don't want to be so hard-nosed about it, but I just do want people to understand where that comes from. It comes from the fact that it is such a grind. It is so hard. You're going to be just wrought with doors being shut in your face and obstacles along the way, just like great stories that you want to be telling. It's just one obstacle after another, and it's all about being that protagonist that has that goal that is just so solid that you're going to see it through to the end, even if it takes 8 years, even if it's not that project, even if you have to, in the meantime, while you're trying to get that one project going, you're writing the next one and the next one. because you can see on IMDb Pro, if you subscribe, you can see, professionals, they have 8 things in development, and they probably have 2 or 3 things that aren't even listed that are in development. And the reason is because, it might take even a year or 2 for one of those to pan out. You just don't know. It's the stars have to align, and it's just going back to that. It's just remembering that it's really something that you have to just have a passion for. If not, then it's maybe try a different avenue or a different part of the industry. Some people can be consultants, some people become agents. Maybe that's kind of, you're close to the right track, but it's just a little slight deviation from it.
Yeah, and that's so true, Curt. And honestly, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. But and just sort of, again, when you're meeting all these people, I always say, no matter who they meet, no matter where they are, I always say stay humble for as long as you can, because you know what I mean. Because you never know who you're going to meet again. So if you do meet somebody who's a PA one day, they could be your producer the next day, or a consultant, like you were just saying, or running an agency, or who knows what. And then all of a sudden you're trying to pitch to them, and they're like, "Hey, remember me? We were on that set, and you were a jerk to me." And and you don't want to be in that situation where you're like, sorry about that. But you know what I mean?
And people remember. I think,
yes.
Unfortunately, I think they remember the jerks more than they remember the nice people. They definitely remember both, but they kind of make a point to remember the jerks, so they don't want to work with again.
Yeah. Seriously. So Curt, just in closing, did you have a question for me?
I did.
Okay.
Because like I said earlier, I am a listener, and I don't think I've ever heard this kind of address, and I'm really curious just for myself. I really love the, I guess, industry term for it's bumpers, the great intros and outros you have.
Mm-hmm.
Now this outro, I honestly have to know, what is the story behind this outro, the voice of this, that it's about to play? Who is that, and what is, where did that come from?
The girl at the end?
Yeah.
That was actually supposed to be my original intro. I got that done on. Okay, so I actually had a friend of mine make that 8-bit intro, and that was my intro for. If they've been listening since like the earlier episodes, that intro, that weird kind of like doo 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 doo, that 8-bit sound, that was done as like an intro. I actually found a girl on Fiverr to do that sort of like, this is the Dave Bullis podcast. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast. Well, I actually took both of them together, and I was like, it's not working. So I took them together, and I mixed them, and I said, you know what, that's going to be my outro now. And my intro is also done by that same 8-bit artist. And that is actually, obviously, the Kill Bill Battle Without Humanity and Honor from Kill Bill Volume 1. And that's the intro, and that's how the outro came to be.
Well, that's very great. Don't change a thing. That little 8-bit and everything explains why. Like, the only way I can express it is like that voice. It sounds like a robot with a British accent that is on Xanax. Like, I just love it. It's just so weird, and it's just like every time I hear it, I'm like, yep. It's about consistency. Like, it's good to have like these YouTubers and podcasters and filmmakers, like you were talking about. It's a brand. It's like you create this kind of catchy thing, and you kind of just have to stick with it because they expect it, week after week or what have you.
Yeah,
so,
and it's so true. It's just like we were saying. You go to McDonald's, you know what the burger's going to taste like. You don't want to go to that McDonald's and have it taste something completely different. You're going to say, "What the hell?" You know what I mean? It's that sort of. They know they sort of know what they're going to expect. If they go to a Tarantino movie, they know what to expect. It's that. Living up to those expectations, and that's what I've tried to make this a little, have creativity here and there, and also try to make a little uniformity here and there. So, but thank you very much for that compliment. I really do appreciate that. Scott McMahon once told me that it reminded him of Scott McMahon from Film Trooper. He told me it reminded him of The Nerdist one time, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, you want to compare me to Chris Hardwick on The Nerdist? Please do, sir. I'm nowhere near his level of stardom or anything, but I take that compliment very, very graciously. And so, Curt, just in closing, where can people find you out online?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you can check out our official site. It's webcamthefilm.com. You can also find us at Twitter at camgirl_movie, Facebook at camgirlmovie. On Instagram, it's at Curt Weiser. And thank you so much for having me on. Please rate, and we're also on Amazon Prime. So yeah, please just, if you're watching Amazon Prime, it's great. Just leave a rating. It'd be huge. Even if it's good or bad, please just leave a rating, leave a feedback. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. And that's it. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast there, Dave.
My pleasure, Curt. Because like I said, you're a person that's been on my radar for a while because we met on Twitter. I believe we met on Twitter, but I usually meet most people there. So it's either there or Facebook. We met on one or the other. But yeah, I've actually had to wanted to have you on for a while, and I will link to everything in the show notes. Everybody, it's at DaveBullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Podcast is at DB Podcast. You can tweet me on either one, everybody. It doesn't matter. I run both of them, obviously. So everything comes to me regardless. But again, I'm going to link to everything in the show notes. And Curt, I want to say thank you so much for coming on, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And with all that expectation we've been building, cue the outro in 3, 2, 1.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.